Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Where we like to really get into these books that people have talked about for centuries.
Yeah.
Sometimes books that have even like a little bit of a fearful reputation.
Right. Yeah.
And today we're talking about a book called the Turba Philosophorum.
Turba
It's
Philosophorum.
also known as the Assembly of the Sages.
Right.
Or the Book of Truth and the Art, and the Third Pythagorical Synod.
Yeah, this is a deep dive that we have you, the listener, to thank for, because so many people have written in and said, hey, you guys should really take a look at the Turba Philosophorum,
Yeah.
and specifically Arthur Edward Waite's 1896 compilation and translation of this text.
Right.
And what's really fascinating about this is just how old these ideas are,
Yeah.
and just how kind of mysterious they are.
And how they've kind of been carried forward and echoed throughout the centuries in various forms.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at a text that has like ancient Greek philosophy, like proto-scientific concepts, and they're all viewed through this alchemical lens.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our mission today is to kind of save you the trouble of having to dig through all this,
All right.
this very dense,
Yeah.
mysterious material.
It can be a little bit much.
Yeah. So we're going to extract the most fascinating insights, the core ideas, and try to get to the bottom of why this book was so significant,
Right.
why it was maybe revered or even considered dangerous by some people.
Yeah. And that really starts with the title,
Okay.
The Assembly of the Sages. I mean, what does that tell you right off the bat?
Well, it sounds like they're getting together
Yeah.
and talking about stuff.
It suggests like collaboration wisdom, bright minds coming together to discuss something important.
Yeah, it's like the intellectual roundtable of its time.
I think that's a really good way to put it. And, the other title, The Book of Truth and the Art, that kind of reinforces this idea even more.
Right. Like they've come to some kind of
Right.
conclusion.
Yeah, a consensus or at least a collection of respected viewpoints on a particular art or philosophy. And then you've got the Third Pythagorical Synod, which of course links it to Pythagoras, the ancient Greek philosopher, and his school. And that adds this whole other layer of like intellectual tradition.
It gives it some weight.
Right, exactly. And maybe even like secret knowledge passed down through generations.
Yeah, like a lineage.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, I noticed right at the beginning, there's this epistle of Aristotle.
Right.
And he kind of lays out his purpose. He wants to like benefit future generations.
Yeah.
By explaining what this book is about.
Yeah, he's very explicit about that.
Right.
It's not just a random collection of thoughts. It's something with a very clear teaching objective.
Okay.
A body of knowledge that's intended to be passed on and understood.
So it's not meant to be obscure.
No, it's not just obscurity for obscurity's sake.
Okay.
There are some very specific, important ideas being conveyed here.
Okay, so let's get into those ideas.
Okay.
What are some of the early dictums, like pronouncements of these sages that stand out?
Well, the very first one, attributed to Anaxagoras, he introduces this idea of a certain nature.
The certain nature.
Yeah, and it's perpetual, and it underlies everything we see.
Okay, so it's like a fundamental reality
Yes.
that everything else is built
It's like the
upon.
bedrock reality,
Yeah.
that everything else is built upon all the ever-changing stuff we can see.
Right, and it's unchanging.
Yeah, it's constant enduring.
Okay.
It's the true origin of all things. And he's basically saying that the visible world, with all its cycles of creation and destruction,
Yeah.
those are just temporary expressions of this more profound reality.
So like the things that are born,
Right.
grow, and decay are
Yeah.
just like manifestations of something deeper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then he kind of abruptly shifts to talking about the role of air.
Air.
Yeah.
Look.
And he describes it as being this vital intermediary,
Okay.
almost like a protective layer for life against the sun's intense heat.
The sun, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting the Turba responds pretty positively to this. They acknowledge that he's described the air excellently.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're agreeing on some basic principles.
By setting the stage.
Right, exactly, before moving into more complex ideas.
So it is interesting because you could look at that as kind of an early observation of like atmospheric science.
Yeah.
But it's imbued with this kind of spiritual element as well.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like an early scientific observation, but with this added layer of divine provision.
Right.
The idea that air was created specifically to temper the sun's power.
And make life possible.
Exactly.
Right.
And then we move on to the third dictum.
Okay.
And this is where Anaxagoras comes in.
Okay.
And he shifts the focus a little bit to weight and proportion as the foundational elements of creation.
Okay.
He argues that weight governs everything and that the varying density of the four classical elements, fire, air, water, and earth,
Yeah.
they all culminate in the solidity of the earth.
So it's like a hierarchy of density.
Exactly. A hierarchical structure with fire being the least dense.
Right.
And earth being the most dense.
Right.
And they all sort of layer upon each other.
To create the world as they understood it.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's a very ordered cosmos based on these fundamental properties.
Right. But the Turba, they're not totally satisfied with this explanation.
That's the problem.
They feel like he's left out something crucial.
What is it?
They say that he hasn't addressed something not known or described except by reason and piety.
Ooh.
So Anaxagoras then introduces this sublime creature.
A sublime creature.
Yeah, something beyond the reach of the senses.
Okay.
Perceptible only through reason, and it's intimately connected to God.
So it's like beyond the material.
It is. He even describes its light as more subtle and pure than that of the sun.
So they're making a distinction between the physical world and this other realm that they think is just as important.
If not more important. They're basically saying, okay, we get the physical mechanics.
Yeah.
But what about the divine spark, the thing that truly animates existence?
Right. They're not just interested in, like, the nuts and bolts of how things work.
Yeah.
They're interested in the why.
Exactly, the animating principle.
Right. Okay.
And then Pythagoras steps in with the eighth dictum.
Okay.
And he asserts that God existed alone before creation.
Okay.
And then brought forth the four elements from which everything else, both sublime and inferior, originated.
So he's addressing that point.
He's directly addressing that.
Okay.
And he specifically emphasizes that creatures originating from water were predestined to multiply.
So there's a plan.
Yes, a preordained plan.
Okay.
Especially for life emerging from water, which of course echoes a lot of ancient creation myths.
Yeah.
And lends this kind of theological dimension to their understanding of the cosmos.
Okay.
He also mentions these four elements and arcana. Yeah, suggesting a deeper, more esoteric understanding associated with them. Perhaps accessible only through divine insight.
Okay.
And then he even hints at a key, a perfection, an end, that he'll place where it won't be recognized by the foolish, but will be understood by the sons of the doctrine.
Oh, that's good.
Right? It's like classic esoteric writing embedding profound knowledge.
Right.
Within these seemingly straightforward statements.
So you have to know how to read it.
You have to have the keys.
Right.
The right interpretive framework.
Okay.
Then in the ninth dictum, Eximinas talks about creation occurring through God's word.
Okay.
And the seemingly paradoxical commingling of contrary elements, fire and water, hot and cold, united peacefully.
That is interesting.
Yeah, this idea of opposing forces existing in harmony is really powerful.
It is, yeah.
It's a recurring theme in alchemy.
Right.
But also in many mystical and philosophical traditions, this idea of coincidentia oppositorum.
Coincidentia oppositorum.
Yeah, the unity of opposites.
Okay.
It suggests that these seemingly contradictory forces are actually interdependent and essential for wholeness.
They need each other.
They do.
Exactly.
Eximinas also points out that the diversity within creation stems from these diverse elements.
Yeah.
And he introduces this idea that perfection requires putrefaction.
Putrefaction?
Yeah, a process of decay and transformation.
Okay, interesting.
And then he distinguishes between perceptible elements like earth and water.
Yeah.
And imperceptible ones like air and fire.
Okay.
Highlighting that their mixture is necessary for human desires to be fulfilled.
Okay, so it's not just about creation.
No.
It's about
the preconditions for human experience.
Human experience, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we're seeing these very practical considerations woven into the philosophical discussion.
Okay, so the things we think of as opposites
actually
are necessary for each other.
They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And even decay plays a role in perfection.
Interesting, yeah.
Then we come to the 10th dictum.
Okay.
And this is where Eraslius and Eximinas introduce this theme of the art of coins.
The art of coins.
Yeah, and it's about transforming copper into white and then red.
Okay.
And they explicitly call it a central key, a fundamental axiom.
So it's important.
It's crucial.
Okay.
This is where the language becomes distinctly alchemical.
Okay, yeah.
Eraslius gives us a step-by-step recipe.
Okay.
It involves immersion in the water of our sea.
Water of our sea.
Yeah, and this probably isn't literal seawater.
Okay.
It's probably representing a fundamental unchanging solvent or essence.
So symbolic.
Most likely.
Okay.
A key to dissolving and transforming other substances.
Okay.
And then gentle fire melting into athelia.
Athelia.
Yeah, which probably represents a purified or refined state of matter.
Okay.
Producing brodium.
Brodium.
Another stage in the transformation.
Okay.
Coagulation into the flour of salt. And finally, the use of gum of gold to achieve redness.
That's a lot of steps.
It is a very specific process.
Right.
And Examianus reinforces this by stating that no true tincture is made except from our copper.
Our copper. So again, there's this idea of like a base material that is being transformed into something more perfect or valuable.
And the insight here is that these practical alchemical processes, they were very likely allegorical representations of deeper spiritual or philosophical transformation.
So the copper isn't really copper.
Right.
It's a symbol.
It could symbolize something within ourselves.
Okay.
Or the material world that needs to be purified and elevated.
So this art of coins is like a microcosm of the whole alchemical project.
It's a microcosm for the larger alchemical project of transmutation and spiritual purification.
Okay.
Now, as we move into dictums 11 through 20, we see more elaboration on these core concepts, but also some differing viewpoints, or at least alternative approaches building upon this foundation.
So they're not all in total agreement?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
For example, Parmenides, he issues a warning against deceptive practices, and he really emphasizes the importance of truly understanding the nature of truth.
The nature of truth.
Yeah, including its cyclical processes of putrefaction and renewal.
Okay, so it's not a static thing.
No, it's a dynamic process.
Okay.
He talks about harmonizing complexions and compositions.
Okay.
The idea that true transformation involves working with the inherent properties of substances.
So you have to understand the nature of what you're working with.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then he says this really fascinating thing. Nature rejoices in nature, and nature contains nature.
Nature contains nature.
Yeah, suggesting this principle of inherent affinity and interconnectedness within the natural world.
Well, like attracts like...
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
Then he gets into some more practical sounding instructions involving quicksilver, magnesia, and sulfur to achieve white and red stages.
Right. And those are all classic alchemical ingredients.
They are.
Okay.
Potentially leading to the coveted gold.
Of course.
And he also reiterates the crucial role of permanent water in achieving the red stage.
Permanent water.
Okay. And introduces the concept of one fundamental matter that can overcome the four elements.
So again, this idea of a single underlying principle.
It keeps coming up.
Yeah.
And then Lucas, in the 12th dictum, he focuses on working with quicksilver and the process of whitening.
Okay.
He gives details on how to coagulate quicksilver and then use it to whiten other metals like iron, tin, and copper.
So he's giving us recipes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ultimately creating something he calls white magnesia.
White magnesia.
Yeah, and he talks about using vapor in the purification process.
Okay.
And he introduces the flour of white salt.
Another flour.
Another flour.
Okay.
Described as ether, derived from atheliae.
Okay.
And the necessity of its boiling.
Got it.
There's also this interesting reference to Marduk and Godinbay.
Marduk and Godinbay.
Which are identified as wine and vinegar.
Wine and vinegar?
In a whitening process.
Okay.
And then this really interesting concept of soul emerging in the context of coagulation.
Soul. Yeah.
Hinting at the possibility of one substance undergoing a fundamental change into another nature.
So like a transformation of its essence.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's all about these subtle transformations and the underlying forces at play.
Okay.
And then in the 13th dictum, we're back to Pythagoras.
Okay.
And he introduces another government.
Another government.
Yeah, basically another aspect or approach within the art.
Okay.
That might have a different name but shares the same root.
Okay.
He talks about a single underlying savor.
Savor?
Yeah, despite the diverse appearances of food.
Oh, so unity underlying diversity.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then he introduces this incredibly enigmatic spume of the moon.
Spume of the moon.
Okay, I like that name.
It's a great name, right?
Yeah.
And it's described as both a stone and not a stone.
Okay.
Both common and precious hidden, yet known, and possessing a multitude of names.
Lots of names.
Yeah. And he lists several white athelia, white copper, that which flies from fire and whitens copper.
It sounds like a magical substance.
It does, right?
Yeah.
The process described involves breaking up this white stone, coagulating it with milk, pounding it, and then cooking it with the spume of Luna.
Wow.
And he emphasizes this ability to assimilate and produce all colors.
So it's like this universal transformative agent.
Yes, disguised under countless appearances.
And they're describing it in all these contradictory ways.
Right, and that's a hallmark of alchemical writing.
Okay.
It often points to this idea of a materia prima.
Materia prima.
Yeah, a fundamental substance
Okay.
that is both common and incredibly potent, hidden in plain sight.
Because it's so ordinary.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a core concept in their understanding of matter and its potential.
Got it.
And then in the 14th dictum, we have Anaxagoras and Pythagoras teaming up
Okay.
to talk about the principles of sulfurs and humidity.
Sulfurs and humidity.
Yeah, they state that sulfurs are contained in sulfurs and humidity.
Okay.
Suggesting a kind of inherent resonance or affinity
Okay.
between like substances.
So like attracts like.
Yeah, you could say that.
Oh, Anaxagoras defines humidity as a venom.
Venom.
Yeah, that permanently tinges a body and prevents the separation of its soul and body.
Okay.
And there's this analogy of pursuit and capture to describe the interaction between these elements.
Okay.
And this idea that a specifically mixed sulfurous sulfur can lead to a precious, unvarying color.
A special color.
Yes.
Okay.
And then they introduce this animal called kenkle.
Kinkle.
Yeah, which contains Tyrian-colored water.
Okay.
And they provide instructions for obtaining a Tyrian tincture using its humidity marine water and a regimen involving urine and seawater.
Urine and seawater.
Yeah, some of these recipes get pretty interesting.
They do, yeah.
This dictum really gets into those specific techniques of tincturing
Okay.
and highlights the sometimes unconventional ingredients that we find in alchemical recipes.
Right.
The animal called kenkle probably represents a specific substance or stage in the process.
Okay.
And the instructions for achieving the Tyrian color, they really underscore the practical applications that were sometimes intertwined with the more philosophical aims of alchemy.
So they were trying to achieve real-world results.
It seems so, yes.
Not just theoretical.
Right.
Okay.
Then in the 15th dictum, we have Phryctes and Pythagoras.
Okay.
And they shift the focus back to this more fundamental principle.
Okay.
They emphasize this incredibly potent foundation of the entire art
Okay.
of very sharp vinegar
Very sharp venom.
that can even turn gold into spirit.
Wow.
This vinegar is described as essential for all color changes.
Okay.
It can incorporate itself into a substance, tinge it spiritually and indelibly, and even prevent it from being consumed by fire.
It's powerful stuff.
It is.
Okay.
And they stress the importance of gentle heat when working with it.
Okay.
And they point out that even a small amount of this sulfur, the vinegar,
Yeah.
can profoundly transform even a strong substance,
Wow.
burning it down to ash and then whitening it into a stone of intense whiteness. It's portrayed as this incredibly powerful, almost universal solvent and transformative agent.
That's like the key.
It really seems to be.
Yeah.
It's very sharp vinegar. It's another strong contender for a key alchemical principle or substance
Right.
presented as absolutely fundamental to the whole process.
Okay.
Then, in the 16th dictum, Socrates makes a bold statement.
What's that?
He says that no true tincture can be produced without lead. Lead. Yeah, lead.
Okay.
He even references Hermes Trismegistus,
Okay.
this legendary figure in alchemy,
Right.
as having infused redness into a body.
Okay.
And he introduces vinegar as the primary virtue,
Okay.
and lead as the secondary,
Okay.
responsible for imparting unchangeability and invariable color.
So lead is pretty important.
It seems to be surprisingly so.
Yeah?
He then outlines this intricate process for preparing lead from kuhul, which is probably stibnite,
Okay.
involving cooking it until it blackens, pounding it with various types of water of niter dew, sun sea, and rainwater.
Wow, they're very specific
They are
about these waters.
very specific,
Go.
followed by more cooking with water of niter until it becomes like tin, and then drying it to produce what he calls incombustible sulfur.
Incombustible sulfur.
And then he describes pounding this with the sharpest vinegar and prolonged cooking.
Wow.
And then, interestingly, he introduces the concept of male and female principles,
Okay.
represented by lead and orpiment.
Lead and orpiment.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is an arsenic sulfide mineral.
Okay.
And he says that their combination is necessary along with Ophilia and sharp vinegar
Okay.
to achieve the arcanum of the work of gold.
So it's all about the interplay of these substances.
It is. This idea of male and female principles, it's a common thread in alchemical thought,
Okay.
where substances and processes are often described in terms of sexual union and generation,
Right.
emphasizing creation and transformation through these complementary forces.
Okay.
Then Simon, in the 17th dictum,
Mm.
he returns to this idea of the sequence of transformations, emphasizing that whitening is necessary before reddening.
Okay.
And then he makes this really helpful analogy with the 4 seasons.
The 4 seasons.
Yeah. Winter representing frigidity and dissolutions, spring associated with air and cooking, summer with fire and coagulation, and autumn signifying maturity and the ability to tinge.
So that's a framework for understanding the whole process.
Exactly. It's a framework for understanding the stages of the alchemical work.
And it's relatable because we all know the seasons.
Right, exactly.
So you can kind of see how that would apply to this process.
It helps to illustrate the cyclical and gradual nature of the alchemical process.
And not instantaneous,
No, it unfolds in a specific order,
like the season.
just like in the natural world.
Okay.
And then he goes on to discuss the process of making lead red
Okay.
by combining it with copper cooking congealing and desiccating it to achieve a red state.
Okay.
And this red lead is identified as the one spoken of by the wise. And it's further mixed with roasted gold to become a tinging spirit capable of acting on other spirits,
Wow.
resulting in a spiritual composite rather than what he calls a volatile wife.
So they're looking for stability,
Yes, a stable, enduring transformation.
not something that's going to disappear.
Exactly.
Okay.
The seasonal analogy really helps to illustrate the idea that alchemical processes
Yes.
are not arbitrary.
Right.
They follow these natural rhythms and stages.
Okay.
And this concept of a spiritual composite
Yeah.
reinforces the idea that the goal isn't just material transformation,
Right.
but a change in the essence or spirit of the substances involved,
Okay.
aiming for a permanent and profound alteration.
Got it.
Now, in the 18th dictum, Mundus states that the mysterious gum,
The gum.
that's been described in various ways, is in fact permanent water.
Permanent water.
And it's from this permanent water that the precious stone of the alchemists is generated.
Okay.
He also notes that this gum is only further perfected or enhanced by the addition of gold.
So gold is important.
It plays a crucial role.
Okay.
And then Mundus gives this remarkably detailed and ritualistic recipe for preparing this gum.
Okay.
It involves white gum urine from a white calf,
Urine from a white calf.
gall from a fish.
That's very specific.
It is.
Okay.
And the body of the gum itself all cooked together for 40 days.
40 days.
Yeah. And then this is followed by various treatments involving exposure to the sun milk rainwater and more of the permanent water.
It's like a whole process.
It is.
Yeah.
And the final stage involves strong cooking until dryness is achieved,
Yeah.
followed by another 40-day resting period.
Wow.
Mundus emphasizes that this regimen makes the spirit corporeal,
Gives it a body.
gives it a physical form,
Okay.
and the body's spiritual...
It's like a merging.
Yeah, it's a bridging of the gap between the material and the spiritual.
Okay.
This recipe really highlights the level of dedication, precision, and maybe even ritual belief
Right.
that was considered necessary for achieving alchemical transformation.
It's like they're not just mixing stuff together.
No.
They're doing it with intention.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the stated goal of making the spirit corporeal and the body spiritual, that really encapsulates the core alchemical aim.
Okay.
It's about bridging the gap between those two realms.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Then Dardaris, in the 19th dictum,
Yeah.
he reinforces the importance of understanding this permanent water.
Right.
He defines it as a spiritual blood.
Spiritual blood.
Yeah, that when combined with a body and pounded together. Pounded together.
Okay.
Results in a tinged spirit like blood.
So it's like a vital force.
It is.
Okay.
And he makes the strong assertion that whatever possesses spirit also possesses blood.
So it's essential for life.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
And then finally, in the 20th dictum, Belus and Pythagoras bring us full circle.
Okay.
They note the frequent and varied descriptions of permanent water and the white and red processes throughout the text.
Right. We've seen a lot of different terms.
We have,
Yeah.
and they point out that while the terminology might differ, the underlying methods are actually in agreement.
Like what?
They're all pointing to the same truth,
The hidden truth.
the hidden truth.
Okay.
And then they introduce this concept of the despised thing.
The despised thing.
Yeah, also called the hidden glory of the philosophers.
Okay.
And it's described paradoxically as both a stone and not a stone.
Right, we've seen that before.
Yeah, it's a common alchemical trope,
Okay.
and it's given all these different names to conceal its true nature from the uninitiated.
Right, so it's hidden in plain sight.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they list some of these disguises based on origin color.
Okay.
It's called the green stone sometimes.
Greenstone.
Yeah, its perceived nature, like the spirit of brass.
Okay.
Even terms from lapidary sales like Savin,
Okay.
the celestial connection with spume of Luna using astronomical or arithmetical terms.
Wow.
And even in terms of its production from metals or quicksilver,
Yeah.
combined with the milk of volatile things.
It's like they're going out of their way to make this confusing.
They are.
Yeah.
But it's all part of this idea of concealing the true nature of the art.
From the unworthy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to sum up, the Turba Philosophorum presents this complex and allegorical exploration of fundamental principles through alchemical processes.
Right. We've seen that.
We've seen the emphasis on transformation,
Right.
the interplay of opposing forces, and the crucial role of this core hidden substance with all its different names.
Right, and that process of whitening and reddening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fear that's sometimes been associated with books like this.
Yeah. Where does that come from?
I think it arises from several factors. It's esoteric nature,
Right.
the potential for misinterpretation,
Yeah.
and the perceived power of the knowledge it hints at.
Right, this idea that you could actually transform matter.
Exactly, and maybe even transform yourself
Yeah.
to those outside the specific intellectual and spiritual context. It could
Yeah.
easily have seemed like dangerous or forbidden knowledge.
Right, like you could unleash something you don't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this brings us to a final thought for you, the listener.
Okay.
Considering the Turpa's emphasis on transformation,
Yeah.
and this idea that even seemingly base substances can contain hidden potential.
Yeah.
What copper in your own life
Mhm.
or field of interest might be waiting for its own process of refinement.
Interesting.
What seemingly ordinary permanent water or sharp vinegar might be the key
Right.
to unlocking that transformation.
Yeah, it really gives you a different way of looking at the world
It does.
and your own potential.
Yeah. And we encourage you to delve further into the historical context of alchemy
Yep.
and its relationship with philosophy, science, and spirituality.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next.